Welcome to Fiction Mage. Tonight, we invite you to settle in, breathe deeply, and begin a quiet journey through a world of imagination, memory, and beloved characters. Let the story guide you gently, one scene at a time, toward rest. This is an unofficial, transformative story, written and assembled by a human author with the help of artificial intelligence. All original characters and worlds belong to their respective creators. Now, make yourself comfortable and enjoy the reading. If this story helped you relax, dream, or simply enjoy a peaceful moment, please like the video and subscribe to Fiction Mage for more stories. During our last meeting, Bluebell tried to settle back into the familiar rhythm of the Demoiselle Café, but Kalm's troubles kept finding their way inside. Mayor Bellinger arrived to discuss the summer festival, asking the cafe to prepare a special menu and a stall for the celebration. But he also brought Adrian Vale with him, reminding everyone that the roads still needed protecting. Bluebell found herself unsettled by Adrian's calm confidence, especially when he promised to hunt the leprechauns on the northern road. As the day went on, she realized that the outside world was becoming harder to keep beyond the cafe door. Now, on to the next chapter. The Blue Flower, a fan fiction from Final Fantasy VII. Part 1, The Tiny Bud. Chapter 6, An Evening by the Canal. Friday had teeth. By noon, Bluebell had decided the day meant to chew through every clean plate in the Demoiselle Café, then come back for the saucers out of spite. The bell over the front door rang so often, it stopped sounding like a bell and became a small brass bird trapped in the rafters. Customers entered in pairs, in trios, in whole weather systems of hats and market bags and summer voices. They wanted coffee before they sat, honey tea after they ordered, a slice of quiche saved for a friend who had not yet arrived, another muffin wrapped for the road, another spoon because the first one had vanished into the private kingdom of a toddler. Bluebell moved through it all with the precision of a needle through cloth. Coffee, 2 cups for the table by the window, a garden salad without onions for old Mrs. Pellier, cheese quiche cut wider for the merchant who always pretended not to notice, lemon biscuits beneath a square of paper for the children at the counter, empty cups to be collected before they could become towers, a chalkboard to be corrected when the word tartlet began to sag at the final T. Beside all this, there was also the festival list in Bluebell's mind, kept beneath a clean saucer so the terrace breeze would not steal it. The hand pies on the list were circled once in pencil, then twice, because the more Bluebell thought about the evening stall Mayor Bellinger wanted, the more the wrapping paper haunted her. Waxed paper, twine, berries, almond flour, lemons, cream, cups. She had written the words in the corner of a flour invoice between orders. The pencil had left a grey smudge along the side of her hand. When she lifted a tray, the smudge rubbed against the porcelain and made her look, for one foolish instant, as if she had been handling ash. She wiped it away at once. "Bluebell," Laris called from behind the counter. "Do we still have the peach preserves from Bellwood?" "2 jars left," she answered, as she was pouring lemonade at a customer. "Pantry shelf, right side, behind the cherries." "And the small plates?" her father asked further. "Second stack near the service hatch, Papa." Paco moved them, because Monsieur tried to sleep on the first. From beneath table 3 came a wounded chirp. He was not sleeping, Paco said, passing with 4 cups balanced along his fingers. He was supervising table alignment with his whole body. Then he may supervise from the floor, Bluebell insisted, like her cat would have been around, listening. Monsieur's tail appeared from beneath the table, black and deliberate. Bluebell had no doubt he considered the floor an insult invented by people without fur. He emerged only when a child dropped a crumb of butter pastry, and then sat in the square of sunlight near the terrace doors, offended but practical. The cafe smelled of coffee steam, pastry fat, warm cheese, summer dust, and the canal beyond the open windows. The stone floor held the day's heat. Bluebell's wrists ached from lifting trays. The back of her neck felt damp beneath her braid. She had been awake since before sunrise, and the day had not yet had the decency to become afternoon. At the counter, 2 travellers asked Laris whether the northern road was safe enough for a cart before dusk. Safer than it was Monday, Laris said carefully. The mayor has put men on the matter. A mercenary, you mean? One customer rectified. The one from Junon. Adrian Vale's name was not spoken, but it struck the room anyway. Bluebell reached for a stack of napkins and made them perfectly square. The corners aligned beneath her palms. That was useful. Napkins did not require an opinion about handsome men who laughed when insulted. If he keeps the leprechauns off the road, I will call him whatever he likes, said one of the travellers. Paco glanced toward Bluebell, too quick to be innocent. She lifted the napkins and carried them to the terrace without looking at him. Outside, the canal flashed hard silver in the sun. Gondola ropes knocked softly against their posts. On the far side of the water, flower boxes spilled blue and white blossoms over the railings, as if Kalm had nowhere else to put its gentleness. Gentleness, Bluebell thought, needed dusting like everything else. By mid-afternoon, the rush crested rather than ended. It rose, foamed, and broke over them again. A woman from the festival committee came in to ask whether the Demoiselle's stall would serve lemonade by the cup or pitcher. A farmer wanted yesterday's bill checked because the numbers looked unfriendly. 3 children argued over whether lemon biscuits counted as a meal if one ate enough of them. Parker rescued a tray from Bluebell's hands, just as her fingers slipped against the handle. I have it, she said. You had it, he answered softly. Now I have it. This is the natural history of trays. She wanted to be annoyed. Instead, she noticed the faint concern hidden beneath the joke, and disliked that even more. Concern made fatigue visible. Bluebell had always preferred fatigue to behave like a private debt. In the kitchen, she almost salted the egg mixture twice. The second pinch had already left the bowl when she stopped. She stared at her fingers, at the salt, at the pale, beaten eggs, waiting with a patience she did not deserve. For one breath, the whole day seemed to tilt toward the basin. Laris, entering with empty cups, saw. He said nothing. He crossed the kitchen, took the salt cellar, and set it gently on the far side of the table. The festival committee has survived without a final answer for decades, he said. It can survive one more evening. It has not been decades, Bluebell pointed out. Bluebell let out something that might have been a laugh if it had more strength. I will finish the list after closing. You will finish the list tomorrow, responded Laris, almost right away. Tomorrow is Saturday, Papa. A bold observation, Bluebell. Saturday begins before dawn, she argued. Then the list may begin after breakfast and learn humility. She looked at him. The kitchen heat had flushed his face, and his grey hair had surrendered another strand near his temple. He was tired too. Everyone was. Even Paco had stopped making speeches to the coffee pot. Bluebell folded her fingers into her palm to hide the tremor that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with having carried the day too long. After closing, she said, because surrender required more ceremony than that. Laris looked as if he might argue, then decided fatherhood could wait until the dishes were done. After closing, then, a small list, a civilized list. Lists are always civilized, she said with humor. Not yours, sweetheart. Yours raise armies. The afternoon thinned at last. Customers drifted out into the goldening streets. Chairs scraped, cups cooled. The sun slipped lower, entering the cafe in long panels that made the dust above the tables look almost ceremonial. The terrace emptied except for one old man, finishing his tea at the pace of a kingdom negotiating surrender. Bluebell cleared plates, stacked bowls, swept crumbs into her palm, and felt the public face of the day begin to loosen from her own. Only a little longer. Her room was waiting above the stairs. Her wash basin, a clean nightdress, Monsieur at the foot of the bed, already forgiven for all crimes committed before dusk. A book left open on the bedside table. Silence, blessed and practical, without questions and without road dust. She wiped the counter in circles, not lines. The stove had been banked. The pastry case held only 3 lemon biscuits and half a carrot muffin, which Paco had declared too lonely to sell. Laris had gone to the back room with the account book. Paco was sweeping beneath the tables, slower now, his sleeves rolled and his hair coming loose at the nape. Bluebell reached for the knot of her apron. First pull, cloth. Second pull, day. The knot loosened. The bell rang. For a moment, no one moved. The sound was too bright, too late, too sure of itself. Monsieur, who had been occupying the windowsill with the gravity of a courthouse judge, opened one green eye. Bluebell kept her fingers on the apron strings and looked toward the door. Adrian Vale stood in the entrance, without Mayor Bellinger beside him, which changed the shape of him at once. He was no longer a public announcement wearing boots. He was a young man in a road-dusted coat. One glove scuffed white at the knuckles, the edge of his sleeve torn near the wrist. His dark hair had been pushed back carelessly, and a narrow scratch marked the side of his jaw. The broadsword at his back caught the lamplight once, then settled into shadow. He looked tired in a way that did not diminish his smile. It only made it seem earned. "Good evening," he said very politely. Paco leaned on the broom. "We are closed." "Nearly closed," Laris corrected from the back doorway, because hospitality had lodged too deeply in his bones to be evicted by fatigue. "Good evening, Mr. Vale." "Mr. Parks." Adrian inclined his head. "I apologize for the hour. I would have come earlier, but the Northern Road had opinions." Bluebell heard the echo before she wanted to. Doors had opinions. Roads now, too. Soon every object in Kalm would speak, except the people who should. "Were the merchants safe?" Laris asked. "Safe enough to complain about the mud, which I took as a good sign," answered the mercenary. The owner of the Demoiselle Café offered a pleased look. "Then Kalm thanks you." "Kalm may wait until the leprechauns thank me less violently," added Adrian, his smile shifting immediately toward Bluebell. "Miss Parks," he said, with a tone Bluebell wasn't sure to recognize. Mr. Vale, she replied, with distant politeness. She still held the apron strings. The loosened cloth hung from her waist, no longer armor and not yet removed. Adrian noticed. Of course he did. He seemed to notice things without grabbing at them. I made a promise yesterday, he said. Yes, you did. To the merchants, Bluebell answered. To you, actually? Adrian rectified, bringing one thumb to his chin, as if he were trying to hide a sudden shyness. I promised you that you would be the first to know if the Levricans preferred action to introductions. Bluebell wasn't sure how she wanted to react. Her body stiffened, and she let a few seconds pass, searching for an excuse to back out. I do not remember requesting a report, she added as a last resort. You did not? That is why I kept it brief, continued Adrian. The road is quieter tonight than it was this morning. Not peaceful, but quieter. No heroic speech attached. That is merciful, Bluebell said, lacking words. I am capable of mercy in small portions, replied Adrian, almost smirking. Paco's broom made one short scrape against the stone. Bluebell did not look at him. Adrian took one step farther into the cafe, then stopped, as if drawing an invisible line and deciding it belonged to her. I also came to ask whether you would walk with me. The answer arrived in Bluebell before the question had finished. No. It was the safe answer, the sensible answer, the answer shaped like stairs leading up to her room. She was tired, her feet hurt, her hair smelled faintly of onions and sugar. Tomorrow would begin early. The dishes were not all washed. The festival list was still unfinished. Monsieur expected ceremony. The cafe did not run on moonlight. However confidently young men entered after closing. No, she said. Adrian did not laugh this time. He accepted the word as if it were a cup handed to him hot. May I ask why? Because it is late, she replied simply. It is early enough for lanterns, he attempted. And because I am tired too, she added, going one better. Then we will walk slowly, the mercenary counterattacked. Bluebell opened helplessly her arms, like she was bound to the kitchen. There are also dishes to clean. Paco lifted one hand without taking his eyes from the floor. Dishes have accepted my leadership. Traitor, Bluebell thought, and liked him a little less for being kind. I must insist. It's impossible. Tomorrow begins before dawn, she said. I will return you before the stars become irresponsible, promised Adrian. Bluebell pressed her lips together, out of options. She tried one last argument that she knew was futile. Because Monsieur disapproves of disruptions. Monsieur chose that moment to yawn extravagantly, showing sharp teeth and no loyalty. Adrian looked toward the cat. A formidable objection. I would not dare challenge him directly. Bluebell folded the apron strings around her fingers. You seem very prepared for refusal. No, I am prepared to make the invitation smaller. His voice softened. The room seemed to notice. A walk by the canal. No mayor, no speeches, no formal introductions. I can leave the Levricons out of it, unless one interrupts us. That is a great many promises for a man who arrived after closing, she replied, narrowing her eyes in disdain, without really believing it. Then start me with one. Come outside for half an hour, practically begged the young man. Half an hour. The words should have been harmless. They were not. They made a little window in the evening, just large enough to step through and foolish enough to glow. Bluebell hated how quickly her mind filled it. Canal light, cooler air, No trays in her hands, no customers needing sugar, no festival committee asking whether lemonade should be sold by cup or pitcher. She had nothing to lose, Adrian might have said, and she would have rejected the sentence for being false. People lost things all the time. Time, quiet, reputation, balance. The neat, folded version of themselves they knew how to carry. And yet, the truth sat under her ribs like a hidden coin. She wanted to go, not because he had cornered her. He had not. Not because Laris and Paco were watching from their careful distances, though their silence warmed her face. Not because Adrian Vale smiled like trouble that had learned manners. She wanted to go because some part of her had been listening since the notice board, since the handshake, since the laugh that had refused to be wounded by her sharpness. Bluebell untied her apron completely. The cloth came free in her hands. "Half an hour," she said. "One walk, and only because I am too tired to argue properly." Adrian's smile brightened, then restrained itself, which was better and worse. "I accept those terms." "I am not going out like this," she insisted right away. He opened his hands as if in a gesture of obedience. "I wouldn't dare dispute that point with you." "Wise," she pointed out to him. She turned before her courage could examine itself too closely. Laris moved aside to let her pass into the stairwell. His gaze held questions, but he did not place them on her shoulders. "Take your shawl," he said. "Evening makes brave people regret their sleeves." "I am not brave," Bluebell replied. His smile was quiet. "Take it anyway." The stairs felt different beneath her feet. In the morning, they carried her down into duty. Now they carried her up into uncertainty, which had much less structure and no clear place to put one's hands. Bluebell reached her room and closed the door, then stood with her back against it, as if the whole cafe had followed her in and was waiting beneath the bed. Monsieur, who had somehow arrived before her, through mysteries known only to cats and draughts, sat on the coverlet. He looked at her with grave suspicion. "Do not start," she told him. He blinked. Her room held the evening gently. The canal window was open, and cooler air moved the curtain in a slow breath. The sewing table still carried a folded hem and 3 blue buttons in a saucer. Her books leaned beside the bed. The narrow wooden boxes of Queen's Blood cards rested on the shelf, secretive and orderly. The cornflowers in the vase had drooped another degree since morning, as if they too had survived Friday's service. Bluebell crossed to the wash basin. The water in the pitcher had lost the day's chill, but still felt clean against her hands. She scrubbed flour from the lines of her fingers, sugar from one wrist, the ghost of onions from beneath her nails. When she splashed her face, the mirror gave her back a young woman with tired eyes and a braid loosened by heat. A young woman not wearing an apron. That absence unsettled her more than Adrian's invitation. Without the apron, her waist felt unguarded. Without the day's knot, she had no proof that she knew what she was doing. She dried her face and opened the wardrobe. There were dresses for work, dresses for Sunday, dresses for weather, dresses that had survived Liana's opinions. Bluebell touched a pale yellow one and rejected it at once as too bright. A white dress looked too formal, as if she expected music to start when she entered the room. The blue cotton she wore most often seemed too much like herself, or at least too much like the self that carried coffee and corrected chalkboards. At last, her hand stopped on a soft green dress she had worn only twice. It had a modest neckline, narrow sleeves, and little pearl buttons that did not declare anything. Elegant, Liana would have said. Sensible, Bluebell told herself, which fooled no one in the room. Monsieur stepped onto the skirt the moment she laid it on the bed. Absolutely not, she said, like she was scolding him. He looked down at the fabric, then back at her, testing whether gravity belonged to him. Bluebell lifted him under the ribs and moved him to the pillow. You shed like a political scandal. He gave a small, offended sound and began washing one paw with legal intensity. She changed quickly, then slowly, because the buttons were small and her fingers had become unreliable. She unbraided her hair, brushed it until it fell smooth down her back, then pinned only the front strands away from her face, with 2 pearl clips she had almost forgotten she owned. From the back of the drawer, beneath ribbons and a pair of gloves, she found the little bottle of perfume Liana had given her last winter. Bluebell had worn it once, decided it made her feel as if she were pretending to know a secret, and hidden it away. She uncorked it. The scent rose pale and floral, with something warm beneath it. Not sugar, not fruit, nothing that belonged in a kitchen. She touched 1 drop to each wrist, then immediately feared she had used too much. She waved her hands in the air. Monsieur sneezed. Bluebell sighed. Yeah, your criticism is noted. The lipstick was worse. It sat at the back of the drawer in a little metal tube, soft rose and hardly scandalous. Bluebell applied the smallest amount possible, then rubbed it with her finger until the mirror could almost deny it. Almost. Her mouth looked like it had decided to answer questions without consulting her. She stared at herself. Not a different person. That would have been easier to dismiss. The mirror offered no enchantment, no grand transformation. It simply showed Bluebell Parks, without flower on her sleeve, without a tray in her hands, without the prepared smile she gave customers before they could ask for anything. She was still tired, still uncertain, still herself. But the room seemed to have opened a drawer inside her, and something folded there had begun to breathe. Nervousness, she realized, had changed shape while she was not looking. It had become anticipation. She took a shawl from the chair, because Laris had a habit of being right about cold evenings and other inconveniences, and went back downstairs. Paco saw her first. He stood near the service counter with a dish towel in one hand and a plate in the other. At the sound of her step, he looked up. The joke he had been preparing, whatever it was, failed at the border of his mouth. His eyes moved from the pearl clips in her hair to the green dress, then away so quickly that the movement itself became a kind of looking. Bluebell stopped on the final stair. The cafe was softer now. Lamps burned low along the wall. The tables had been cleared. The pastry case was empty except for the half-muffin Paco had defended from commerce. Laris stood near the back doorway. Adrian waited by the front, not leaning, not prowling, simply waiting. Evening breathed around him through the partly open door. But it was Paco's silence that struck her. For 2 years, Paco had had a word for everything. A clever word, a foolish word, a word dressed up as a bow, and fired from the wrong corner of the room. Now, he held the plate as if it had asked him something difficult. You look, he began. Do not say surprising, she interrupted him. I was not going to. She raised her index in the air. And do not say clean either. His mouth curved, but the smile arrived late. I was not going to say clean. Then perhaps say nothing, she concluded. He nodded once, still not quite himself. You look not like the kitchen has any claim on you tonight. The words were simple. They landed where old foolishness kept its little chair by the window. For a second, Bluebell remembered watching Paco sweep at dawn, remembered the curve of his smile in morning light, remembered all the ways she had put usefulness between herself and wanting. Something in her softened toward him, then moved on. That movement surprised her most. Laris came forward with her shawl, though it was already over her arm, and pretended he had not noticed anything at all. You will stay near the canal paths. Yes, Bluebell said. Adrian answered at the same time. Yes, sir. The sir startled Bluebell almost into a smile. Laris looked between them, not sternly, not easily either. Trust, Bluebell saw, cost him something. He paid it without showing the coins. Enjoy the evening, then. It is half an hour, Bluebell reminded him. Then enjoy the half hour. Adrian opened the door. Bluebell stepped through it before she could revise herself. The bell gave a soft, single sound above her head, gentler than before. Behind her, the cafe's warmth folded inward. Ahead, Kalm had become a town made of lanterns and water. For the first few steps, Bluebell noticed only practical things. The path nearest the canal was dry, despite yesterday's wash water from the flower stalls. Her shoes pinched only at the left heel, and not enough to be fatal. Adrian walked on the street side without announcing the fact, keeping his pace matched to hers. The broadsword at his back looked less theatrical in the evening than it had in the square, more like a tool he carried because the world sometimes required ugly answers. Across the canal, gondolas slept against their ropes. Windows glowed above the water. The large Mako tank in the central square hummed beyond the rooftops, steady and patient, hiding inside the town's comfort the way a thorn hid inside a rose stem. Bluebell pulled the shawl around her shoulders. Cold? Adrian asked. No, she replied with a touch of pride. That was quick, he remarked. I had the answer ready, she admitted. Useful, he said, almost laughing. I should prepare more of mine in advance. He seemed content to let silence walk with them for exactly 9 breaths. Then he began talking. He spoke of the northern road, though not as a trophy. A cart axle cracked in a rut. A young chocobo panicked at the smell of blood from an old attack site. 2 leprechauns had shadowed the ridge until he and the merchant guards forced them back with noise more than blade. The scratch on his jaw came not from battle, but from a branch that had shown admirable timing. So, the tree wounded you? Bluebell said almost sarcastically. In my defense, I was very focused, he added, to make her laugh. Are you sure you're up to the task of hunting leprechauns? She said in a deadpan tone. I'm wondering if I shouldn't retrain as a lumberjack, he replied with humor. She looked away before he could catch the smile. Lanterns trembled in the canal, each reflection thinner than the light above it. Adrian kept talking. Shunon entered next. Not the grand city from Travel Prince, but the working one. Gulls screaming over the lower docks, salt in every hinge, soldiers who learned to sleep through cannon drills, old fishermen who could insult weather with professional elegance. He had left because monster work paid better on the move, and because a man who stayed too long in one military town began to confuse orders with purpose. You were in the army? Bluebell asked. No. Around it. Near enough to learn which boots to avoid. He glanced at her. My father repaired harnesses and straps for Shinra units. My mother sold fish to men who complained about prices while wearing equipment worth more than our roof. Chunon teaches arithmetic in strange ways. There it was, a shadow at the edge of his voice. Not a speech against Shinra, not a confession. Only the small hardness of someone who had counted costs from below. And mercenary work is better? She asked. Not always, but I choose more of my nose. The answer stayed with her. She did not know what to do with it, so she watched a moth batter itself against a lantern glass until it found the dark again. I do not take work that frightens people who already have less power than the person paying me, Adrian said after a moment. I have failed at that once or twice. Most people do, if they live long enough to be honest. But I try. Roads, monsters, escorts, missing goods. Work where the danger has teeth and admits it. Bluebell thought of Mayor Bellinger's polished smile. The tourists praising Kalm's charm. The Mako tank humming as if it had never heard a question. Dangers with teeth seemed almost courteous, compared to dangers that wore civic ribbons. Adrian cleared his throat. I have been talking too much. Yes, Bluebell said. He stared, then laughed. The laugh was low this time, surprised out of him rather than offered. You could have softened that, he remarked to her on an amused note. I am off duty. Once I've taken off the apron, I'm no longer obliged to be civilized. So, this is the uncivilized version, Adrian said, laughing intermittently. Bluebell tucked a lock of blonde hair behind her ear with a small, rather graceful movement, almost despite herself. This is the version that did not bring a tray, she added. Adrian let her silence hang for a few seconds and took a deep breath. Well, I like this version. The words were simple enough to pass as banter. They did not. Bluebell felt them brush the inside of her wrist where the perfume waited. She looked down at the cobblestones and hoped the lantern light was too amber to show anything useful. Adrian, to his credit, did not pursue the flush. He let the canal carry them under a stone bridge where the air cooled and smelled of water, moss, and old mortar. Your turn, he said when they emerged. My turn? She asked in surprise. I have filled the whole canal with Junon, branches, and my philosophy of employment. You may rescue the evening from me, he insisted. That sounds like a lot of work, Bluebell replied, mockingly. And yet, it doesn't seem like you to be scared off by a lot of work, he pointed out. Bluebell adjusted the shawl. No customer smile. No polished answer. Only the water beside them and Adrian waiting as if waiting were an actual skill. The cafe begins before dawn, she said. That is the first thing. People think it begins when they enter. But by then, the room has already decided what kind of day it will have. Rooms decide, he wondered. Of course. The kitchen especially, she started. Some mornings the oven behaves like a scholar. Other mornings it behaves like a mule with a religious objection to pastry. I knew there was theology in pastries, Adrian replied with humor. She looked at him sharply. And what about that other guy that helps you? He asked, innocent and not at all innocent. Bluebell almost laughed. Paco? For a second, Paco crossed her mind, but she would not let him dwell on it. He's a great help, she started, and a good friend. He seems fond of speaking to everyone, especially the ladies. Am I wrong? Adrian asked. Bluebell was surprised to see that Paco's reputation had already reached the newcomer from Kalm. she stifled a burst of laughter. "Yes, it is one of his illnesses," she said, kindly, without, however, managing to completely hide a hint of disappointment. "And what about your illness, Bluebell?" Adrian asked. The question should have been too direct. It was softened by the way he asked it, not as an arrow, but as a hand held palm up. Bluebell considered several safe answers. Work, early mornings, correctly folded napkins. Liana would have said worrying, then blamed it on virtue and ordered dessert. Monsieur would have offered no answer, because cats did not believe in accountability. "Dough," Bluebell said finally. Adrian blinked. "Dough? Really?" "Yes," she started with conviction and a touch of irony. "It's an addiction. Well-behaved dough. It tells the truth. If you rush it, it punishes you. If you listen, it becomes something useful." "That is much kinder than swords," remarked the mercenary. "Swords do not become tarts," Bluebell replied. "Are you completely sure about that?" he asked jokingly. This time she did laugh, not brightly, not enough to lose balance, but truly. The sound startled a pair of pigeons from a roof beam. Adrian looked absurdly pleased with himself. "Do not be proud," she said. It was a very small laugh. "I collect victories in modest sizes," he added. The walk became easier after that. Not smooth, exactly. Smooth belonged to people who knew how to be looked at. But easier. Bluebell told him about Monsieur's executive habits, about Liana's talent for arriving when food was cooling, about the old women who judged quiche crusts as if Kalm's legal system depended on butter. She mentioned books, then stopped before Loveless could make her sound dramatic. She admitted, after some negotiation with herself, that she collected Queen's Blood cards more than she played them. "You collect but do not play," Adrian wondered, genuinely intrigued. "Playing risks losing," she began. "Collecting risks dust. Dust is manageable." "That has to be the most representative answer from Kalm that I have ever heard," he replied. "You have been here only 4 days," Bluebell pointed out to him. "And I have studied the town intensely," he said, as he raised a hand like someone making a promise. She tried to be witty. "Then you should know Kalm dislikes being summarized." "Does Bluebell Parks dislike being summarized?" he retorted. She smiled gracefully without realizing it. Bluebell Parks dislikes being discussed in the third person while present. He let his gaze rest on her longer than he had intended. Noted. He said it with a solemnity that made her mouth betray her again. They had reached the narrower path that curved toward Akira's concert hall, where the canal passed beneath a stone terrace, and the buildings leaned closer to hear themselves reflected. Music gathered there before the hall appeared, a ribbon of voice and strings rising through the evening. A modest crowd had formed near the entrance. Some stood on the steps. Others leaned against the terrace wall with cups in hand, drawn by habit as much as admiration. The doorway below the stone arch glowed amber. Inside, Akira sang. Akira was nearly 40, thin as a candle that had burned elegantly for years, with dark hair combed back and a jacket, too fine for the dampness below the terrace. He had once performed in Midgar, people said. Some said at real halls with velvet seats. Some said only at lounges where smoke stained the curtains, and applause was hired by the glass. Akira never corrected anyone. He sang as if every version had been true at least once. Tonight, he stood just inside the open doors, one hand lifted too long in the air, eyes half closed, giving a love song the full weight of a national tragedy. The melody was beautiful. The performance was larger than the room. Each note seemed to climb a staircase, discover no balcony at the top, and leap anyway. Bluebell and Adrian stopped at the edge of the listeners. A woman near the steps sighed with complete sincerity. A man behind her whispered the next line before Akira sang it, then looked ashamed of loving it so much. Lantern haze hung under the terrace. Someone smelled faintly of tobacco, someone else of violet perfume. Applause waited in every pair of hands before the song had even ended. Akira reached the final refrain and held the last note until it trembled, thinned, and survived by pride alone. The crowd applauded. Adrian did not laugh. Bluebell was grateful for that. Then he glanced at her, and in his eyes she saw the thing she herself had been trying not to smile at. Not mockery, not cruelty, but recognition. Akira had thrown his whole heart into a room too small to catch it. They were two awkward people standing under a terrace after pretending all evening not to be awkward. The scale was different. The bravery, perhaps, was not. Bluebell pressed her lips together. Adrian looked away with heroic seriousness. That made it worse. Her laugh escaped first, quiet and quickly covered by the applause. His followed, tucked low in his throat. Neither of them looked at Akira. Neither of them needed to. For one brief moment, surrounded by neighbors and lanterns and an old song that wanted the world to be grander than it was, they shared a private corner of the evening. When they walked on, the smile remained between them, like a small contraband lantern. "You are laughing at me," Adrian said. "I am not," she insisted. "You are laughing near me with suspicious timing, then." "That is not a crime, is it?" she asked rhetorically. "In Junon, timing can be evidence," he replied. "Then, I am fortunate to live in Kalm," she added with genuine honesty. "For many reasons, I think," he concluded. The softness in his voice changed the street. Bluebell did not answer at once. They had turned back toward the Demoiselle. Above them, the first full stars appeared, pricked clean through the deepening blue. The Mako tank hummed somewhere beyond the square, but tonight the sound did not reach her as strongly. Or perhaps something nearer had begun to make its own noise. Her heart, inconvenient organ, refused to obey the hour. The cafe came into view with its windows warm and its flower boxes dark against the plaster. It should have looked exactly as it always did. It did not. Bluebell saw the door from the outside and understood, with a little ache, that she had left it for herself and returned changed by only half an hour. That seemed too much power for 30 minutes to have, and yet there it was. Adrian stopped before the step. He did not reach for her at once. He looked at her hands, then at her face, asking without making the question heavy. Bluebell could have pretended not to understand. She did not. She offered her hands. His palms were warm, roughened by sword grip and road work. The contact echoed the handshake at the notice board, the almost handshake at the cafe. All those public touches wrapped in politeness and watched by other people. This was different. No mayor, no introduction, no joke sharp enough to hide behind. Just the two of them beneath the stars, with the canal breathing somewhere behind them, and the cafe waiting like a witness that loved her too much to interrupt. "Did you have a good time?" Adrian asked. "Yes," Bluebell said. The word came too quickly. It escaped before caution could dress it in conditions, before wit could trim it down, before fear could ask whether good time meant too much Her own answer startled her. Adrian's face lit in response, open and delighted enough that she almost took the word back just to protect them both from it. Almost. Good, he said. I did too. You've mostly talked, she pointed out jokingly. And yet, by some miracle, you had a good time, he replied triumphantly. Do not become impossible about it, she implored him. Too late. I may already be impossible. She tried to free one hand so she could look severe, but he released it before she had to tug. That mattered. Every small permission mattered. Tomorrow evening, he said. May I ask again? Bluebell looked toward the cafe window. She could see movement inside, perhaps Laris crossing the room, perhaps Parco pretending not to cross near the window at all. Tomorrow would be Saturday. The cafe would open before dawn. Liana would hear about this somehow, even if the walls had to grow tongues. The festival list remained unfinished. There were dozens of reasons to refuse. They lined up neatly. None stepped forward. Half an hour, she said. And if you mention levrikins before I have sat down at breakfast tomorrow, I will reconsider retroactively. A strict contract. I accept, he announced, almost solemnly. You accept too quickly, she added. Adrian approved. I am learning to collect modest victories. That should not have pleased her as much as it did. Adrian lifted her hands a fraction, not to kiss them, not even close enough to make her decide what she would do if he tried. Only enough to acknowledge that he held them and would let go. Then he did. Good night, Bluebell. Her name sounded different without Miss Parks in front of it. Less proper, more dangerous, more hers. Good night, Adrian. He stepped back, smiled once, and walked toward the canal path. He did not look over his shoulder until he reached the corner. Bluebell was still there when he did, because apparently her feet had resigned from service. She lifted one hand in a small gesture that could be blamed on politeness if anyone asked. He returned it, then vanished into the lanterned street. Bluebell entered the cafe. The bell rang softly. Laris was behind the counter, closing the account book with the excessive care of a man who had not been waiting. Parco stood near the kitchen door with a dish towel over one shoulder and no plate in his hands now. Monsieur sat on the counter despite several laws of civilization. You are back before the stars became irresponsible, Laris said. Mr. Vale keeps at least one promise, she admitted. Parco's gaze flicked to her face, then to the shawl, then away. His smile came easier this time, though something thoughtful remained beneath it. Did the canal survive? Barely. He filled most of it with words, Bluebell said, as she was already affectionately recalling the mercenary's long tale. Laris laughed under his breath. Parco looked as if he wanted to ask another question and chose not to. Bluebell was grateful for the mercy and unsettled by it. She kissed Monsieur between the ears, which he allowed with the weary patience of royalty among commoners, then gathered her skirts and went upstairs. Her room received her with familiar shadows. The canal outside had darkened. The cornflowers in the vase were only silhouettes now. She took off the pearl clips and set them beside the Queen's blood boxes. She washed the lipstick from her mouth, though some colour seemed to remain because memory was apparently poor at following instructions. The perfume lingered at her wrists, faint but stubborn. Monsieur leaped onto the bed before she finished changing and arranged himself where her feet should go. You are impossible, she told him. He closed his eyes, accepting the tribute. Bluebell lay down carefully, as if sudden movement might spill the evening. The room was quiet. Below, the cafe settled into its wooden bones. Somewhere in the square, the Mako tank hummed its old patient hum. But it lost the contest tonight. Her heartbeat was louder. It moved through her with no respect for sleep, no respect for schedule, no respect for the fact that Saturday began before dawn. She turned onto her side. Monsieur's weight warmed the blanket. The scent of canal water seemed caught in her hair. Adrian's laugh returned first, then Paco's unfinished silence, then Laris telling her to enjoy the half hour, then the feel of warm hands asking and releasing. Bluebell pressed her wrist beneath her nose. The perfume was fading, the feeling was not. The room was quiet, but inside her, someone had opened a window. This is the end of Chapter 6 of The Blue Flower, a fan fiction in the universe of Final Fantasy VII. We hope you enjoyed your time with us. Like and subscribe if you wish to support our channel. And let's meet very soon for the next chapter. Take care of yourself and be kind to others.